We're back. Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by
Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
Oh, Krista, this has definitely been a very hobby-heavy week for me. Have you gotten your hobby on a lot this week?
A lot, actually. 3 separate resin print projects, actually maybe 4.
Ooh.
And then also did a bunch of terrain prep work for I think it was the Absalom City Dungeons and Lasers terrain stuff. I finally busted that out and started getting it ready to paint up. So yeah, it's been a lot.
News.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And we also got to do some hobby together. We
did.
We had a body double session.
Yes. I worked on, I guess, technically they're Chaos minis. I am going to be using them for Chaos, but also for D&D. So.
You were painting your very weird flamey things in. So tell us a little bit about those. Tell us about what you were doing.
The ones I went with are Wild Mesh is the Patreon. And one of the reasons I really like them, a lot of times like Flame Demons, they're kind of just disposable offense, right? Like they're really squishy and like they're kind of a throwaway. And I think that shows sometimes in the sculpts. I mean, no offense to anybody else who's made them, but they oftentimes kind of look goofy and they're just kind of shooting like a big tongue of flame out and it's doing its thing. One of the things I liked about the Wild Mesh ones though is they actually sculpted that fire into the support of the mini, so a lot of them are actually like shooting the flame down and it lifts them up off the ground. So like they have these very dynamic flight poses, and they're basically a big kind of like beholdery eyeball, some wings, sort of. Well, they're not even really wings. They're more like an array of arms that come down into their vaguely change themed. We will say change themed because I don't want to say anything like, too Warhammer derived.
I think we are allowed to say that even when they aren't. It's one of the advantages
let's just
of
say
us being a podcast.
Their hands are very bird dragon-like with feathers, so you can kind of go where that's probably sneeching for. But the flame's very dynamic, and then the mass on the back of these things just have these big like masses of tentacles that are just like kind of flailing all over the place. Yay! And then they're up on screen if you're watching with us. But yeah, if you're not watching, you're just listening. The fire is like shooting down and kind of keeping them off the ground, or maybe they're like kind of up on the big writhing mass of tentacles. And very clever. The physics of the minis are very cleverly done, so that just like a tiny contact point. And I actually used transparent bases on these guys, so they really look like they're flying, and I'm very happy with the look. Was really struggling with trying to get the colors down, and I ended up showing you some Turbo Dork, some metallic gradients. There's big bird heads coming probably someday, but these guys, at least for their first appearance, if you actually look on their hands, Alex Chivers said, "Where's the big bird head?" If you look on their hands, they do in fact have big bird heads on their hands. But yeah, there's actually some other big birdie things. Although I probably would go, I don't know, with OPR or Z-Kinos, or I think Z-Kino. Anyway, there's some really good big change demons out there. But these guys will also, I painted up with the metallics because I kind of wanted to reach back. If you're familiar with 3.5 D&D and their Psionics rules, they had astral constructs. And they were often described as looking metallic. And so I wanted kind of this shimmering metallic look because that's kind of what they're going to be standing in for my D&D usage.
Yeah, you were telling me you were having to put 5 or 6 coats of this paint on these models?
Not uncommon apparently. I did a lot of like watching tutorials and looking at it on like YouTube and various web pages. The metallic stuff from Turbo Dork is great, but you have to put it on and put it on and put it on.
But these aren't just metallics. These are special metallics.
Yes, they are shifting metallics. So like very comparable to the Vallejo color shift paints if you've seen them. Color shift metallics. I think the Vallejo ones did go on in about 2 coats when I did them. They were a little bit more aggressive, I guess. They don't get quite as much per bottle. And I know at least easily available, you usually have to buy them in a set. The color, the Turbo Dark stuff is all available, one at a time. Although apparently, sometimes when they upgrade their formula, they lose a color. So that's interesting. We talked about this, and so I'm just going to make sure anybody who's listening or watching, if you use Turbo Dork and you want to do your whole army, buy mini bottles of it right away. Like buy them all together, because that batch of paint will be identical. Because from what I saw online, sometimes when they reformulate or upgrade stuff, they lose the exact color mix. So buy it all at once.
So this is to be enemies in your players to go up against weird astral constructs.
Yes, they have aggravated some enemies who are using a massive psychic ritual to attack them with these psychic constructs, kind of like pyrokinetic manifestations, which is super cool for D&D. But then they're going to also be joining my big chaos pile of which is growing to be a pretty formidable point total, I guess, for like OPR or other chaos friendly games.
And I was going to save this for next week, but you mentioned Turbo Dork with this, and I will definitely have more to talk about this next week. But I also did an order from Turbo Dork very recently.
Yeah.
So frequent listeners would know that, I like my wet palettes for when I'm doing my traditional painting and stuff. And also I want to say howdy real quick to Herberto, P&D Mike, Alex, Titan Troll, and Don Wanden. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the live chat. If you got any questions, get them in. We'll answer them during the show. So for most of my normal paints, I love using wet palette. Like, honestly, I think that every painter should use a wet palette. Absolutely. But for, my metallics and my, in my speed paints and all of those, I still go the Duncan Rhodes route, and I have a 50-cent white ceramic tile that I use as my dry palette. But there's a problem with the white ceramic tile method.
Oh, what's that?
If they're flat, and sometimes my paints, especially the speed paints,
can roll off it.
Accidentally mix with their neighbors. And then suddenly I get a very neat new color. And sometimes that's fun, because I also use like air metallic, so they're very thin metallics, and they also run freely. And so like, oh, look, when the speed paint hits the metallic, suddenly I have candy red, which is useful if I want to paint, a nice little chaos monster in candy red, but not all that great. Not all that great. So I am enjoying. So I looked online and I saw that Turbo Dork was offering a paint palette unlike any I've seen before.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, they're offering a silicone paint palette.
Interesting.
And one of the things I dislike about any sort of dry palette is cleaning it. I know that famously Guy from Midwinter Minis hates cleaning his palette so much that he doesn't. He just primes it every time he wants to use it. And I was like, that might be smart.
I kind of like that.
So Catlett is saying you can get the texture ceramic tile. I hadn't thought about that, but that would be even harder to clean. This is still easier to clean than most dry palettes I've used. So I'm going to try out this silicone palette from Turbo Dork, because it should be super easy to clean, because nothing sticks to silicone except other silicone. There's a reason we use it. I use a silicone mat underneath my resin printers, etc. So I hope this works. There's a downside. There is a downside. And I'm going to be testing this next week before I bring it back. And that downside is it costs $40.
Oh, that's a downside. Yeah.
I could buy 80 of my ceramic tiles for that and just throw it on the ground when I'm done painting.
Well, when I'm
done
using
painting,
metallics,
boom, done with it.
When I'm using metallics and speed paints, I and many of my TikTok mini painting friends are now officially the paper plate crew, because we just use coated paper plates.
Coated, okay, coated. Like
Yeah.
I cannot recommend paper plates
No,
uncoated because
but
it
a
just
fancy
drinks your paint.
Dixie coated paper plate works just fine for those things because you don't get that separation you would get
Yeah.
on like a standard paper plate.
Yeah.
But yes,
And CCatlet is in chat saying that that is insane for that chunk of plastic, and I'm kind of agree because that's a bit much. Yeah, I think I'm only like I had a very good payday recently, so I might be throwing money around a little bit. But I I
well, if you find yourself
I
with
also
too
think it
many
was a bit
$40
much.
silicon molds, you can always send one to me
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I did
So,
not.
but then after I ordered it, my dad of all people was like, "Hey, don't they make those little silicone fake bubble wrap pop things? Couldn't you just use one of those as a paint palette?"
Oh,
And then
like
now
the
I'm
fidget
like, "Oh
toys
my
that are like
gosh,
$2.99 and
yes, I can get one for $1.50 at the gas station." So
yeah,
I'm going
that's
to rush out after this podcast and buy one of those
test them side by
and
side.
test it side by side to see
I do
which
love
is
every
better, $40 Turbo Dork or gas station pop up palette.
you gotta love the chat though. Like so many makers are just like design it and print it and make a mold and just pour silicon and like of course because that's the community for sure. I
Absolutely.
also,
And Dad's work or 3D workbench is actually I am thinking about doing exactly that after toying around with this if I like it because the um the CEO of Reaper showed me I forget her name. Dang it. But we were chatting and she showed me her palette that she uses, which is a ceramic palette with very, very tiny but deep wells in it
mhm.
and dozens of them. They're like all the size of like a pill. Like, in fact, she called it her pill or her pill palette. And because of that, we use very tiny quantities. The normal wells don't work because they're designed for, actual portraiture painters. And so those big wells expose too much of the paint surface area for the little drops of paint we're using to paint miniatures. But that palette that she uses has lots and like dozens of little tiny wells, like just good enough to put 2 or 3 drops of paint into it and then mix it with water and use it on your mini. And I love that one. That palette cost $20. I bought it and lost it, which is why I'm using this right now.
Oh, that's the worst.
And so I'm going to try this out. And if I love it, I'm totally going to resin print a mold of my custom version of it, and then pour some silicone into it, and do my own custom paint palettes. And because I make my own paints to on my own 3D printed miniatures, why shouldn't I make my own palette to do it with? All that's left is me chasing horses down to get my own brushes. I have
I don't
goats. Do you
know.
think goat hair would like if I just shave my goats a little bit every so often? Do you think I could get good brushes out of that?
I will plead the fifth. I have no idea.
uh,
Funky goat hair. Would
During
it smell? Would it
hmm?
smell? Would the goat hair smell? I don't know. I
My
guess
goats don't smell.
I have offended your goats. Oh no.
My goats are very good little goat boys.
All
I
right.
like my goats. They're very friendly.
Are they
And
toy goats or are they like full size goats?
they're full size goats.
I have a family member who raises kind of like mini toy goats that are like itty bitty.
Herberto Bell says like those wolf bristle brushes. I haven't heard about wolf bristle brushes. That seems like a dangerous way to get a paintbrush.
It sounds cool, but yeah, a little spooky. All right.
And Dad's Worksbench says I got a silicone mat for $1.50 from Daiso. I don't know what a Daiso is.
I
But
don't
I
know
need
what
to
a
check it
Daiso
out.
is, but apparently Roberto also likes them, and now I want a Daiso because I don't know. Ever since I lost Aldi in the Midwest from moving back out here, I covet strange chain stores.
See, Catless says they are less flexible than Sable. Yeah. So when I'm not chasing down goats to get hair for my own custom brushes, that I'm totally not doing, I am going to. I was also painting with you
Mm-hmm.
during our little hobby hangout, in which I wasn't painting at all.
You weren't. You were basing, weren't you?
I was basing and assembling models during the hangout stream, and again, like I'm basing my little rats, and I'm using the MDF 1 inch bases with like the pre-cut hole for my magnets, which is all super fun because I got to send the spec sheet to Laser Crafter, and they got exactly the bases I want. War Chest Creations, the one I went through, they're wonderful to deal with. I absolutely recommend them on Etsy
I should probably
if
hit him
you've
up
got custom
because
needs.
the local, I did find Gajo here locally does do pre-cut wood rounds, which are super cheap too, but they don't have the magnet hole though.
And I did get a little bit of painting in. You won't be able to see this super good because I don't have the good, awesome camera. But I
He's
painted
just
up the very first of my little ratties,
such a
and I'm going.
respectable young man. He's
Yeah,
so clean.
I'm going with red. These are going to be my very rich red and gold army.
Didn't you have a vampire army? Isn't that what a vampire army does?
My vampire army is very red and black, and also purple and ghosty, and very not majestic royal red. They are very, very dead, very covered in blood and
Well,
dead.
you have all that misty green glow too, yeah. Oh, interesting. We could see getting some paint case tips, essential oil cases for minis, and also tattooing ink cases. Wow.
Yes, those are great for storing paints, and I might need to do that because hey, I got a couple of hobby tips for you right now, Kristen, that I can just throw into one quick update.
Oh, okay.
The
I'll
first,
hear it, especially if it's overflow, because my beautiful wood case is now jam packed after I got those last turbo door. Like it's
no, it's definitely not about overflow. You know
oh,
those really cool hex
your FDM
mounts.
prints on your walls, yeah.
Yeah, those aren't FDM prints.
Oh,
The hex ones are just literally the GW. It was $15 for them,
oh
and
dear.
I mained that. I just bought them from GW to put my GW pots on the wall. Don't do that. Do
Did your
not do
pots
that.
did your pots leak? Did they fall? What
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. So I imagine it works great for their layer paints and all that jazz. It does not work great for contrast because now I have two different contrast pots that are empty and have just a giant acrylic glob onto whatever was below it, and not a great time. I'm gonna have to replace like 4 bottles of contrast paint that I do not want to buy at $8 a bottle, and
No,
I'm going to
no.
be ripping that off the wall, which means I'll have some more wall space to put something else up there, and putting them in drawers, or I don't know, like I'm really like I was disappointed the last time I used contrast paints compared to the speed paints, and now I'm going to put them in a box. I might just get rid of them.
Hmm. I don't know, like that last new line of contrast though, like which is funny because we've talked about it that they're not really contrast paints; they're just really high density.
Hmm.
I don't know, ink or something or gloss because it's so even. Those is it Doomfire Magenta is yeah. I did see Catlett just pointed out the Painter's Fortress on Kickstarter. I actually backed it.
What is the what? Tell me about this Painter's Fortress. What is this?
It is a Kickstarter where you get kind of a themed modular paint station. I think it's
Oh,
intended for FDM, but you can
it's
basically build it
3D
out.
printed.
Yeah, yeah. And it looks, you just found it, so you can make it look like a little like building or what have you.
So this is just the gothic theme.
I want to say it had some other options, but
Oh, this looks like this is really cool. Yeah, yeah. A very cool little custom. There's lots of 3D printable paint racks and stations out there, like lots of free ones you can get on Etsy and stuff. So this one looks like it's very well designed, very well thought out. Also, they were very much thinking about how fast it can print because it prints as little flat pieces that can be assembled. This
yep,
will not take you 6 weeks to print,
correct.
like a
Um,
certain game table we looked at earlier.
but as CCat, let's also throw out there are more themes at the bottom, I believe. If you keep
Oh,
going.
and these side panels, these are perfect for something I wanted to do. This one, there's a really cool side panel that's meant to be decorative for this, that has like lots of pipe working and then some filigrees and some stuff like that. I want to 3D print a dry brush palette, because there's totally fantasy of it too, so that's also great. Norse theme, a Norse theme. Okay, I like that, because when I'm dry brushing, I'm a horrible heathen and I'm using a paper towel. And if the artist opus method is to be believed, that saps all the good liquid out of your dry brush, which is why your dry brush is supposed to look chalky. And so they use like a piece of non-absorbing textured mat to do that on instead.
Just to like scrape the paint off or something?
So you use up the paint, but you use up the paint evenly. So pigment and moisture are being removed. And because the thing you're using it on has a texture, you can watch until you get it to the consistency you're wanting for the dry brush. And so you know right away, okay, that's exactly where I want it. Now I can put it on the miniature.
Right.
And I know that some people make these themselves. Like they'll just throw a bunch of objects into a box and glue them down and then prime it. But I was like, hey, 3D printer, I'll just take a cool textured thing. Well, these are exactly the sorts of textures I want. So you want like smooth round things and hard things and textured things all mixed together, so that you can just test it out on different textures to see how it will work. And then you just, when you're done with it, you actually go back to the Guy Midwinter Minis thing and just prime it every so often. And because it's 3D printed, if I ever do prime it so many times I've gummed up all the details, I can just 3D print another one. I know that some people have done these and put them up on Thingiverse. So yeah. I was looking at printing one of those, but this is exactly perfect for something like that.
Well, and you could always get it primed to a certain point and then just texture it up and use it for the wall of Ruin. Either slap it on some FPS or do something else. You could repurpose that as terrain, if you wanted.
But this what's it called? It's from Wargaming, which is a cool name, and it is called the Painter's Fortress. It is really cool. It's basically, if you've ever seen those like MDF kits, like all the drawers and like the perfect little paint racks and stuff, it's exactly one of those that you see on a lot of YouTubers' paint desk, except for it's decorated all the crap and gothic sci-fi stuff. It's very 40K themed.
I got a plastic reinforced foam core version of this. Was my first one, but because you can't customize the paint sizes, it doesn't fit GW pots in them, except for like one set of holes. GW, yeah, it's only $25. So it's
the paints that I have the hardest time finding fits for are my Pro Acryls, because they're such a unique chunky bottle.
Yeah, and although they slightly fit more holes, I thought, but I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. And I do recommend if you get the Pro Acryl, buy the alternate lid packs. They're cheap and more traditional droppers that clog a lot less easily. And also it lowers the total height of the thing, so it fits into a certain painting case we love so much.
Yeah. I may have shot one of those bottles all over myself on a live stream once.
Say what? How did you? I'm confused and impressed.
Because it was jammed and I couldn't get it to unjam, and I started, hitting it. And that squirted it all over a shirt, which was a brand new shirt also. It was a total, almost as good as today was. Yeah, anyway.
My second painting related tip, is something I saw John doing on the video that he didn't explain.
Ninjon?
Ninjon, yeah.
Ninjon, okay.
Which is... So I use blue tack to put my minis onto my little handles, and I was of a super glue method of less is more. So I would just roll up a tiny little ball that I knew would squish out into a good size underneath the base, and I'd put that down there. And what that meant was I would then spend forever taking a big wad of the blue stuff and patting the bottom to get all the blue stuff off the base after I was done. But then I saw that Ninjon was using the more is more method, and I wanted to try that out. So gigantic blobs of blue tack covered the whole base, and the whole top of my little painting handles. These are my little homemade painting handles, and boy, does it work really well. They stick good. They're not coming off real easy. And when I peel one off, I've just broke it.
Oh no!
It's not the base's fault. It comes off clean with no blue tack on the bases.
Nice.
And you get little.
Yeah.
Though because it's a particle board base, some of the base was left behind on the blue tack.
I see.
Which is fun by me.
C Catlet says they prefer museum wax for holding them on.
I have heard that, and then I bought 2 packs of museum wax, and then I lost them.
I am being the classy person I am. I use dollar store 2-sided foam tape.
The foam tape I find grabs my minis too hard, and I can't get them off easily, and I break so many minis trying to get it off the double-sided stuff, had that like the 3-ohm stuff.
Too much trouble with that. I did priming rods with it, so I would put a whole bunch of minis on it, and just they're kind of hanging over the edge because I just use like a maybe like 1/2 inch. It's just foam core that I had left over from making terrain, and then prime them all on that, and then pop them off and then put them on a little teeny row of it. So that's the thing. I'm not using a full base of that double-sided contact. I'm just using a stripe of it, which also gives you an edge to pop off. So
Lord Novus is saying, well, I thought everybody put a huge thing of poster putty on the base. Hey, maybe I'm just the wrong person. And then Alex Shabler says, save that content for Only Paints, Kristen.
Hey, if you'd sub to an Only Paints, I'll put some content out as long as I get some money for it. Yeah.
I'm going to have to start doing painting streams because you all keep asking me to do it. And so I guess I'm just going to have to start doing it.
It's actually my best lives on TikTok are when I'm painting or doing terrain. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to it, Alex. Maybe I should be squirting paint all over myself on a more premium medium.
I mean, I did build this studio with like camera mounts for the painting, so I might as well use them.
Oh yeah, I'm just using like janky wobbly arms you would get at like a
inflatable tube man.
It's like they're just like bendy things. Like 5 and Below sells them. They're super cheap.
All right.
I did eventually get a better one off of Amazon. It was like $8.
All right. So it's time we probably transition to talking about some newsy news items that have come up and that is relevant to 3D printing gaming enthusiasts. The first of which is it's been 3 weeks, so naturally we have a new Elegoo printer to talk about.
Of course we do.
So Fallhammer is the one who caught this in English because evidently there is a Chinese YouTube channel that has gotten their hands on a Mars 4 resin 3D printer. More importantly, it is a Mars 4 DLP resin 3D printer. So, Kristen, do you know the difference between a normal resin printer and a DLP resin printer?
The DLP one's the projecty kind, right?
Yes. So instead of having a layer right below the resin that masks off a gigantic blast of UV light, so you're shotgunning UV light and then using a monochrome screen to mask off part of that light right where it hits the resin in order to get your shape, you instead use a DLP projector of UV light so that it is shaped at the point of broadcast and then reflected up onto a clear just a clear glass bed that has the resin on it. So the shape of it is the light itself is shaped as it leaves the projector,
Right.
not so much getting masked off at the point of resin contact. This means much sharper lines, much more accurate shaping of that light where it hits the contact for it. It also means things like they last forever.
Yes, let's say
They
it
last
lasts better,
so much
and you
longer.
don't have to have the terrifying process of replacing that LCD screen.
Yes, yes. There's no accidental scraping of the LCD screen because all you are ever scraping, should you have a resin incident
It's
or
just
need to
glass.
clean the screen, is just some Gorilla Glass. And that's
Yeah.
all you have to clean.
This sounds like we're moving in the direction for Kristen because
Yeah.
that
So it is Mars sized with a slightly bigger print area than a traditional Mars 3, which is the current love of the small form factor resin 3D printer. So absolutely perfect size for beginners and for most hobbyists, really. Most people don't need the bigger printers. So this is 74.7 millimeters by 132.8 millimeters print bed and a maximum print height of 150. It has the cool built-in air filter option so that you can, not have to get all those horrible resin fumes around you. And it is an activated charcoal filter, so it will, yes, safely filter the resin fumes.
see Catlet's saying Mars 3, it's not quite as big as question mark.
It is uh uh huh. It says it is smaller than the Mars 3. Yeah, bigger than the Mars 2. Interesting. I thought it was slightly bigger than the Mars 3, but I am wrong. It is smaller than the Mars 3.
But bigger than 2.
Mm-hmm. So it is a nice sized resin printer.
Still
DLP
going to
is
be
the
good for
draw
minis.
here.
Yeah.
It is smaller than the Mars 3. Yes, absolutely is smaller than the Mars 3.
You know what question I'm going to ask? Huh? What question is that? I'm going to ask? It's how much does it cost? Do we know yet?
We don't know. We don't know yet because this was a horrible advanced leak.
Meaning it'll be on surprise sale on Thursday. Sorry, that's the other thing. It's like the sudden announcements.
Okay, so here's the big. Most of that smallness. So it's 10 by 14 smaller on the X and Y, which is negligible. So bigger than the 2, smaller than the 3. But it loses out 25 millimeters of height printable. I don't usually print very tall things on my printers. I usually just like load up as many minis as possible. But if you are printing tall things, then do pay attention to that. So yeah, the big draw here is the DLP. In every other way, the Mars 3 is the better printer. So longer lasting, more accurate light. That's the key there. It's not going to print faster. It's not going to print bigger, but it will print much more reliably and crisper. But also, the resolution is not quite as good either. So even though you're going to get more accurate lines, you're not going to get the sharpest detail. So it's this weird side grade to the Mars 3. It's in many ways a downgrade to the Mars 3, which makes it baffling why they're naming it the Mars 4. But again, it's Elegoo, and they name things weird.
Yeah. Still interesting. I'm hoping somebody ends up trying it out and lets us know how it goes, because I'm still probably holding out for a bigger build plate than that for DLP. But
yeah, I would very much like to see a nice big old Saturn size DLP printer, for instance. That would be great. But at the same time, I'm loving my original Saturn. When it gives up the ghost, I'm going to probably go to a Saturn 2, or if there's a Saturn 3 by then, I'll go to a Saturn
12.
3.
Yeah.
A Saturn 12. It will not make it to Saturn 12. It will not. So there is that. We also, and that's the only 3D printer news I've got to share. Do you have any other 3D printer news before I get into the weird paint news?
Nope, not really 3D print. I have a game news, but that's coming after your paint news, I think.
Okay. So following up, we like paints. I like paints. You like paints. These minis don't paint themselves yet. We're still waiting for affordable full color 3D printing. So until that time, we have to hand paint these ourselves. And also, I have a lot of fun painting minis. The Speed Paint 2.0 that has been largely lauded is finally available for pre-order. We finally have pricing. But right now, the only one they've got available for pre-order. We do know this is not the only set that will be available. Yes. But the one that they have available for pre-order right now is the Speed Paint Mega Set 2.0, which is $200.
That's $199.
Okay.
Yes, $200.
I'm giving it $200. And it comes with 45 new colors, 4 old colors, and a bottle of medium. All of the colors, including the 4 old colors, will have the new formula. And so what's new, so special about the new formula? It doesn't have the reactivation issue. That's the big key. They've solved the reactivation issue with the speed paints.
I will believe it when I see it.
But I have to believe it because they can't hype it this much. And also, the reactivation thing never really bothered me. I just figured it as a feature of the paint that I had to get used to.
I was about to say, if you use the medium, it doesn't happen. And if you do it with water, you can use it to blend, which I thought was really cool.
So what they're saying with the new formula is that for a couple of hours, it will still easily blend and reactivate. But once it cures, it will no longer reactivate, which is the other one would take days to cure before it became impossible to reactivate it. The other big thing, besides the fact that it's going to have a whole lot more colors and a whole lot more bright colors, the old Mega Set definitely lended into the muddy and dark, which is really where these paints kind of shine. But the new set has lots and lots of colors that are very bright and vivid. And the other big thing is they have metallics, speed paintable metallic colors.
Looks like P&D Mike's very happy about that.
Yes. I want to see how this looks, because if I can just get the effect of a paint and wash in one good coat, I'll be very happy, because I have not been very happy with Null Oil lately since it got reformulated. Not because of how it performs color-wise, because I just used it to paint my new Ratty. But what it did is, when I put the new Null Oil over my nice shiny metallic, it dulled it down as if I varnished it, which is weird. The old Null Oil, the metallic still looked the sheen stayed, because a lot like when I'm just painting weapons, especially old weapons on orcs and stuff, bright silver, Null Oil, I'm done. And it looks like and it's very shiny. And the new one, it just matted it down as if I sprayed satin varnish over top the whole model.
On my last, I did those Chaos Knights that were Pride or whatever themed, and I had to just spread it as fast and as thin as possible, because otherwise, it was just swallowing. Because I actually had some color shift on those too, and they were just turning gray. Just kind of gray, dull. It was still metallic looking, but I had to get it really thin to keep the color preserved at all, which was kind of weird. But that does look like an awesome set.
Also, they can't seem to agree what paintbrush you get. So they're saying that you were going to get a triangle-handled special speed paintbrush with the set, and also a palette. Maybe I really made a mistake paying $40 for a hunk of silicone.
Because you're going to just have a pile of palettes soon.
Totally, I'm just going to have
a palette of palettes, perhaps.
You're going to get all the paints, and $200, which is exactly twice as much as the last one, but you're also getting exactly twice as many paints. And this is still $100 cheaper than getting the full contrast line initial release.
Yeah.
And that's not the only new paints.
I was about to say, you said they're doing a second round of something else.
Yeah, so I'll be on to these paints. Duncan's Two Thin Coats is having a second wave of paints. At first, I thought this is coming so soon after the last Duncan Kickstarter for paints that
Given
it was
how
just going to
long that
be.
took to fulfill,
Yeah,
it's
I was
probably
thinking
not
this
as
was.
soon as you think.
I thought this was going to be like Kingdom Death Monster. Oh, it's just they're going to do another print run, and
Yeah.
it's like yay, but no, it's 60 new paints for Duncan's Two Thin Coats is coming again. Another Kickstarter. Transatlantis Games is doing the paints themselves, and again they are marketing this entirely on Duncan's name. They barely mention the quality of the paints or their performance or features. Literally just we making paints.
Duncan.
Duncan's put his name on it.
Well, I will say this for them: these first ones were super opaque, really good coverage. Like I mentioned, probably from shipping overseas or whatever happened, they were super pressurized, so they like practically exploded out of the bottle when I opened them. So be ready for that if you get into that first run, and then like I also mentioned, the pigments are so strong and so dense that dry brushing didn't matter. I could I could run it over the paper towel and absorb all that precious moisture. I still got a perfectly flat green orc when I brushed that green on there.
Awesome.
Like it was really strong. So,
So
they deliver that for sure.
So they're offering the first wave and the second wave as options here. So you could get the original wave, the new wave as part of this Kickstarter, or you can get $360 and get all the paints. And they're also offering some very blatantly branded. I'm gonna have to say very branded storage racks for these paints for you to put up in your game room if you wanted to. From everything I've heard from everybody who's touched it, you've taught using them. Obviously, Goobs and eBay Miniature Rescue had videos on them. They seem to be very good paints. They seem to be very well put together paints. I know that even Ninjon did it and they're being compared favorably to very Citadel like paints, and they also seem to have very close color matching to very many specific Citadel paints. So if you like Citadel paints but don't want to have them leak all over your hobby desk because they're terrible when stored sideways in the worst paint pots imaginable, this seems like a great option. Also still very cheap compared to Citadel paints.
And formulated thinner, so you don't have to do like as much medium shenanigans. You can kind of just go with them.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably stick happy in the land of Pro Acryl and Vallejo for now, personally.
I do love Pro Acryl so much. I know I said 3D Dad was mentioning that he's been trying it too, really likes it, and I can't fault Pro Acryl.
Yeah, I do love the Pro Acryl stuff. It's wonderful. It paints up so good. But you know what? I love that we have so much great choice but just a few scant years ago, you had the choice of Citadel, Army Painter, and Army Painter used to suck, and they're trying to reformulate now. The speed paints are great. Their air paints are great. Their original war paints, they're reformulating those. That's less big news than the speed paints. At least now they started putting mixing balls in all their paints. Thank God. That because no paints have needed them more. Vallejo, if you could get it. Like Vallejo is super great, but in America it's super hard to get. I don't know about in Europe. In most game stores, you really only had Army Painter and Citadel, and that was all you get in the US game stores. Those are your choices. And now it's like so many great choices available. There's like Pro Acryl, which is some of the best paints going. Oh, Reaper paints. In America, Reaper paints is always an option. But I always had a hard time finding a game store that had a good stock of them. And oftentimes they would be very old and questionable.
Or just a really big box. Yeah, I did
P3 was decent, Herberto.
P3,
P3
yeah.
was decent, though they were still in pots. That still was not great.
Yeah.
And they also, past tense is very much applied here. I know that they still technically exist, but it is impossible to find them. Reaper paints are very, very good paints that I think more people should give a shot to as well. But I know that in Europe, they're very hard to get. All right, so paints and stuff. But you said you had something you wanted to chat about this episode.
Yeah, a little bit. It'll get to the obvious reason at the end, but there are games we play with all these minis we print, right?
Yeah, I know. I love games. I love playing games with my minis.
Well, yet another Patreon tribe has announced a rule set. This is Clay Cyanide. The game is called Wargrounds. It is it says the word armies, but looking at the actual rules, it is a skirmish plus game, in my opinion.
Okay.
There are 3 modes for it. Obviously, you could scale it up though because it's still just point based. There's a 100 point, a 200 point, and a 300 point are their defaults for their like supported missions and stuff. And that generally gets you like 4 minis or like 2 minis and a hero. Interesting though, because like OPR, there are generic rules for minis. Like you can just have a cleric or a caster or a heavy or whatever, and their rulebook has just like basically you can play with whatever. Which I thought was very surprising because they've been hyping this game coming for years. And they did their factions line, which were themed groups of, kind of suspiciously about 12 minis, right? Like ish. And kind of fitting in that, would be that 300 point range for this. But they've always done their mythological sets, which you could still use for this game. And I think that's one of their points is you could use any minis for it. I did notice, though, that in the more recent factions, they've actually been going back and adding them to the factions. There are custom rules for their minis. So you're going to get abilities for their minis that don't exist in the generic list, which isn't too surprising. I think OPR does some similar stuff with some of their armies, if I recall correctly. But it, to me, is very much in that skirmish niche, but has miniature agnostic possibilities. And you're getting to the sneaky punch here. To celebrate the launch of this, if you join their Patreon or tribe in February, you get 10 of their previous faction releases. So that's 120 minis. And the minis are freaking gorgeous.
Yeah, very pretty.
They include the cute mice in there, I think.
I missed the mices. It's time to get the mices.
But you got pandas, you got owl people, you got nightmare people, you got dwarves, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle knockoffs. Anyway, these would be a great base for an OPR army too. But just even popping in to look at the rules look fun. I'm not seeing the mice in that one. Maybe I'm wrong about the mice. Mice might have been last month. Maybe I'm short mice. Or the current mice. Okay, the current one is the mice. Yes, they are in there because that's the actual one. It's not the 10 bonus sets. You're getting 11, I think. Anyway, it's crazy for $10. You also get the rules set, which it's still beta. It's still, I'm sure it's going to evolve. It looks like it'd be fun. One of my favorite dumb things. Okay, I am all about like just the way activation or mechanics get hyped up, and their activation mechanic is measured as hours. You get 24 hours to spend a day of battle, basically, and you're activating your minis based off of how many hours it takes them to do a thing, which I thought was fun. Also, your movement speed is your defense score for ranged attacks, which I thought was fascinating. I don't see that a lot. I know it's happened in a couple other games, but
yeah, that's a BattleTech thing, which makes sense. So I'm glad to see something else. Like in BattleTech, it kind of made sense because like giant robot move fast, it makes a lot of sense. I've never seen it applied to like people scaled things.
Yeah, but that's part of how the mechanics work for that. So I thought it was fun. I like the flavor of the day, the battle day instead of turn. I mean, it's still turn. It's obviously we're pushing around the same general mechanics pool, but the only thing I think would be somewhat upsetting would be to play their customized armies. Like they've an army called AFAM or a faction called AFAM, which is like kind of Sylvaneth-ish tree people, and it had an ability. Its hero can resurrect models if they die, and that one I didn't see like too many other things that had something similar. I mean, it kind of probably reminded me of like Necrons, right? Because they can do like reanimate or something sometimes. But yeah, it's an interesting. I think it's an early game, but for just the ten different faction bonus things, it's crazy value. And
Yeah.
if you sign up on their Patreon, actually, maybe they try to, but definitely on their Patreon, I know you also get their mythological set for the month too, I think. So
That is cool. That is cool. I think they're making the right choice by focusing on skirmish scale because really all the excitement I'm seeing in the wargame space these days is at this medium and smaller scale gaming.
mhm.
Um, like if you look at like a couple of the darlings that are out right now are Conquest, which is an army scale game, but much smaller, like a much smaller armies than we're used to in like the Warhammer or even heaven forbid the Warhammer Fantasy days, especially like 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy, which literally was let's see how many things you could spam on the table at once, or even one of my favorite games, Kings of War, which is still very much hundreds of models per side fight each other. And I kind of like dozens of models per side fight each other, which is
Sure.
why I like one page rules because the default 2K it does come back to that old early Warhammer Fantasy dozens of models and in ditto with Grimdark Future. It goes back to those older edition sized games,
The
and
local,
Conquest is doing it, and Star Wars Legion is very much that whole medium and smaller size. And then, of course, there's the skirmish games themselves, like the 12 and under, your kill teams, your firefights. It's just so much less intimidating and so much easier to recruit somebody that says, hey, paint 5 to 12 minis, or just that's your whole force ready to go. We're still going to have an amazing time of cool tactics, and also at that scale, you like it's an individual doing cool things. It's like it's heroes doing heroic things on the battlefield, in less abstractions of like these two sides of the epic fantasy opening sequence clash against each other and then
right.
hundreds of people died abstractly, we can't really see it. It has a more of an emotional impact.
Yeah,
I
I was
do
about to
dig the
say
skirmish scale.
what really hooked me was Necromunda for that back in the day, and
Yeah.
I really hope we start seeing some good advancement rules for some of these games because that was part of the fun, so you guys
Mm-hmm.
survived, had a chance of getting that weird level up, whatever it was, and I really liked it.
I mean, there's a reason that Stargrave and Frostgrave are such beloved games because they harken back to that Mordheim Necromunda, exactly like you said, campaign style gaming.
Right.
I know like OPR has that with the gang fight rules. That's meant to very much evoke that Necromunda style of gaming, and I know that's popular too. So
But they
I
don't
don't
have
know.
a
It's
fantasy version of that, do they?
not
Not
that
yet.
I'm aware of. No,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of. That would be cool.
Does
That would be very
does your
cool.
Rangers of Shadow Deep or whatever? What was
Yes,
that?
because that's very much exactly the same kind of game with the
Right.
exact same rule system as Frosthaven, honestly,
Right. Right.
but it's cooperative instead of competitive. Though I say that, but both Frosthaven,
Osgrave?
no,
Or
Frostgrave and Stargrave have released major expansions to make them cooperative games as an option. There's this like and Elder Scrolls, the miniature game, is a cooperative game by default
mhm.
too. Like there's this gigantic rush of want of co-op gaming for this space, which makes perfect sense because in the board game space that's been going on for a while too. And honestly, it makes complete sense. We want to be able to just hang out and do things cool together without being at each other's throats. Alex Shivler, OPGR RPG Win. It's already in beta, and you can download it on the Patreon. Yeah,
Yes.
it's called Age of Fantasy Quest right now is on the Patreon right now. It's less RPG and more. It definitely leans more into the adventure miniature gaming with RPG flavoring, kind of that Rangers of Shadow Deep dungeon saga space that's doing it. So that exists there. And I guess I have to give my weekly disclaimer. I work for One Page Rules. I have a bias.
I have also worked for them, but I'm not currently engaged.
So I think this is great. I think it's cool. I want to check the game out. The skirmish scale is probably the very smart choice there. And also, Clay Cyanide does not. They don't want to do armies. They want to do the like just based on the stuff they've made in the past that I've loved. They want to do these epic, dynamic, humongo poses, over the top minis, and that that leads yourself to skirmish games because it's very hard to rank up models when they are literally jumping off the scenery.
You sound like me. Alex just says, "Ooh, I have the subscription already." Yeah, like you have to go check because you're not sure.
I had to double check here, and I was had to double check here and be careful because I was scrolling through this Clay Cyanide page on their Patreon because I googled it, and it's like they have their discount code displayed here.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I just streamed it live. And I'm not subbed to them. This is a public post.
Right. Well, yeah, so it's got to be. I don't know if it's got to be publicly accessible though. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not.
I should not be able to access
that. Is not a casual discount code. That is one of the deepest discount codes they've ever posted.
Yeah, they are running a 70% discount code right now for all their models.
So if you want to get their army packs for the, not the 10 they gave, you can also grab those at 70 off, which is insane.
Yeah, which is craziness. And Clay Cyanide makes some amazing quality minis. I've loved their stuff. Like their Arthurian set is still one of my favorite sets that's been made.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Anything else? Oh, yeah, I do have a shout out.
Yes.
To our beloved Titan Troll here. They have a cool Kickstarter going on right now called D&D Heroes Fighters. And
yes, they're really good sculpts. Super impressed by this.
So Titan Troll miniatures, which we've shouted out in the past, they do this like very middle fantasy or even low fantasy aesthetic to their models. One thing I like to say with Titan Troll is they have the best faces in miniatures right now, because I know that modeler loves to do busts, and so the faces on their figures are always just like incredibly well detailed and usually unique and very well put together. And the theme with this is it is a whole bunch of popular fantasy species and a male and female fighter for each of them. No boob plate in sight. So if that's kind of aesthetic you want, like this, the human fighters just by default are probably two of my favorite of the set. They go all the way down to very much not 3-creen as one of the stretch goal options that they're about to meet. So they got dwarves with swords. You don't see dwarves with swords very much. Half orcs that have proper armor and not half naked, and they seem to have mashed gnome and halfling together into their option there. Very cool Kinku birdfolk models.
The birdfolk minis are rad. Those are really good.
Yeah. Really cool tieflings, very good goblins. Like, it's a good set of minis. They're asking, the early bird is 25 pounds to get into, or $31 for the early bird. And if you're hearing
tonight.
This, you've got a couple of hours to grab it. Or otherwise it jumps up 5 pounds to 30, which is 37 USD. And you month of their Patreon, which is also very great. One of the things that they do, I know they pride themselves on, is they sculpt unique characters every time. They don't do the dozens of reposes options for their models. So even in their weekly stuff, it is 100% unique sculpts and not just the which I understand why you do it. It definitely builds out the models, but a lot of sculptors will do like a base model and then repost it a few times and do another base model to get the numbers up there, and it absolutely works. But it is also very fun when every single one of the town guards in the town guard set is unique.
Yeah. I was hoping he was still in here, but I don't see him in chat anymore. I was just gonna say, I'm curious what month we get, because oftentimes I'll back a Kickstarter and realize, oh, I'm already subbed, so I got a free month I already had.
Yeah,
which doesn't work. Anyway, it's
all
like
right.
that one time I was subscribed to Mammoth Factory for 3 months, 2 times.
That means you get twice the digital models. Print them twice.
Good times, yeah.
All right. So I think we are running out of steam and running out of shout outs. Anything left for you, Kristen? All right. So if you want to listen to more of our stuff, all of our past episodes, you can find them on printyourgames.com, as well as all of your favorite podcast programs. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a like and a comment. That helps boost the algorithm and let people know that we're worth watching. If you want to support the show, one of the very best things you can do is leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. I think we're 5 stars. If you think we're 5 stars, please go ahead and give us a review. That helps us more than anything to help spread the podcast around and get it recommended to more people. If you want to, you can find us on all the socials, the Facebook, the Twitter, etc. at Print Your Games. And of course on YouTube, we are youtube.com/Param. I am Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery. And don't forget to use your screen protector. Unless you have a DLP.
And we'll see you all next time.